The sun was high by the time Lee returned to the shelter. Dust coated her boots and calves, her eyes were dry now but swollen. She hadn't cried like that in years. The lioness was still sleeping, the cub suckling quietly at her flank. Lee crouched beside them and watched in silence. Something about the small, ordinary scene, the steady rhythm of nursing, the gentle rise and fall of the lioness's breath, woke a painful ache in her chest, tender, unfamiliar, almost sacred. It felt as if the world were trying to speak in a language she had forgotten. She reached for her sat phone. She hadn't checked it in days, maybe weeks. No new messages, only the tiny blinking light that meant poor signal. She turned it off, then on again out of habit. One voicemail appeared, unknown number, no timestamp. She hesitated, thumb hovering, then pressed play. Crackling static, then a voice, male, soft, painfully familiar. Her blood froze. Lee, if you're hearing this, I hope it's because you still have your faith, but if not, that's okay too. She dropped the phone like it had burned her. It hit the ground with a dull thud. The lioness blinked awake. Lee's heart thundered and her breath came in shallow gasps. That voice, Micah's, couldn't be. He'd been gone 6 months. She picked the phone up with trembling hands and hit replay. I wanted to leave something behind. I asked God to let me say one more thing just in case I didn't make it. And if you're hearing this, Lee, please don't walk away from him. Even if he feels far, he's still there, especially now. Lee sank to the floor, no tears this time, only stunned silence. Remember what you told me, Micah's voice cracked. That God isn't afraid of our silence, that he waits there. Well, maybe now it's you who needs to believe that. When the message ended, she stared at the wall, numb and shaken. She had just read that same line in his journal. There was no way he could have timed this. No way he could have known she'd open the book today unless God had timed it. She wanted to argue, to scream, to dismiss it. She could not. Something holy hovered in the silence. For the first time in 6 months, she did not feel alone. Days later, it rained for 2 nights straight. Steady, whispering rain that made the soil breathe again and softened the world. Even Lee softened. She hadn't replayed the voicemail, she didn't need to. Micah's voice looped through her mind like reluctant background music, stitched into every small task, filling water bowls, cleaning a swollen paw, watching the cub curl tighter against its mother. God isn't afraid of our silence. He waits there. The line clung to her the way a wet jacket clings to the skin. Lee found herself under the canvas roof one afternoon, looking at the distant ridge where Micah's usually parks his trunk whenever they came visiting the reserve. He just passed on. No warning, just silence and then screaming. She had prayed, fasted, believed. She had believed God would heal him, and he hadn't. How could she believe now? The lioness stirred and let out a low, restless growl. Lee approached carefully. The leg that had been healed before was swollen again, an infection demanding attention. Okay, girl, let's not give up now. She spoke the words gently, in a whisper, bending to bandage and clean the infected wound of the lioness, then froze. The words were not for the lioness, they were for her. That evening, rummaging through the bottom of her pack, Lee pulled out the Bible she hadn't touched in months. The leather was cracked, the edges dusty. She held it as though it might burn her, like it might open a wound deeper than she wanted to explore. Then slowly, almost without thinking, she opened it. A flower fell out. Another pressed flower. A second one, not the one from the journal, a different kind. She blinked. Micah's handwriting was on the note folded inside. If you're reading this, it means you're still here. And that means God's not done. Her hands trembled. No one else could have placed those flowers here. He must have left them long before they died. Maybe he had known she'd fall apart. Maybe he had known God wouldn't let her stay broken. That night she dreamt of fire, not the all-consuming blaze she feared, but a warmth she had forgotten. She stood in a charred clearing, rain-soaked trees like blackened ribs around her. Everything was lifeless except for a small steady flame in the center, gentle, stubborn, alive. She walked toward it, reached out, and a voice, neither Micah nor her own, whispered, "The fire didn't leave you. You left the fire." She woke up with her heart pounding, watched the sky bleed from black to ink blue to the first pale stars, and felt something like a memory of warmth return. A few days after the dream, the daylight came with the scent of damp earth and the sound of life returning, birds calling, insects humming, the cub purring softly against its mother. The world felt strangely awake, but Lee didn't feel the same. She felt like something inside her had cracked open, and she wasn't sure if it was healing or breaking. She made tea in silence, poured it into the same chipped metal cup Micah had once used, and sat under the fig tree just beyond the shelter. A breeze touched her skin. Gentle, familiar, the sat phone buzzed. A text, from a number she did recognize this time. Pastor Reuben, she hadn't spoken to him since the funeral. He had tried, left voicemails, sent scriptures, but she'd ignored everyone. She didn't need sermons when her world was ash, but the message was short. I was cleaning out the church storage yesterday. Found something with Micah's name on it. Looks like a sealed envelope addressed to you. Want me to send it? Her throat tightened. She didn't reply for a long time, then typed, "Yes, please, send a picture." 5 minutes later, the photo came through. Her name in Micah's handwriting, sealed, her hands went cold. He wrote me a letter. Another message came from Pastor Reuben. He gave it to me months before the accident, told me to hold on to it in case you ever stopped believing, said you might need it more than you admit. That evening, she finally received the scanned letter in full. Lee read it in the dim light of the shelter and felt the floor shift beneath her. The letter wasn't long, but every line hit like a struck bell. Lee, if you're reading this, it means everything has gone wrong. It means you've probably decided that God has left you, that the silence is proof of absence, that the pain is punishment, that the story is over. But you're wrong. I've watched you walk through fire before, you don't bend easily. But this loss might break you, I know, because I would have been broken too. So I asked God months ago if he would let me write this from the other side of the mountain. And he did. Lee, you told me once that silence is where God speaks loudest. You were right. But you forgot something else. He also speaks through pain. Not as punishment, but as preparation. This letter isn't just a goodbye, it's a torch. If I'm gone, then carry it. There are people who will need the fire in you, even if you don't feel it now. I know you're going to feel lost, maybe for a long time, but I promise you, God isn't finished. And the moment you decide to feel again, you'll realize the silence wasn't God leaving. It was him waiting for you to stop running. I love you, always did, always will. Micah. Lee folded the scanned page against her chest like a wound, and for the first time in months, allowed herself to cry. This was not the broken, ragged scream of the night at the hospital. It was a different water, slow, deep, as if something inside her was thawing. She did not sleep that night. She lay beneath the fig tree with the letter tucked into her hand, watching the moon arc and knowing that the space between her and God no longer felt like an unscalable wall. It felt like a question waiting for an answer. At dawn, the cub mewed. The lioness nudged it toward Lee, trusting her. Lee crouched, cupped its warm head. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered. She sat cross-legged on the sand, palms open, heart pounding. For the first time since the accident, she tried to pray, but it wasn't a speech, it wasn't poetic. It was more like a whisper, scraped out of dry places. "God," she exhaled, barely above a breath. "I don't know what to say. Silence. I don't trust you, not yet. But I miss you." Wind stirred the branches above her. "I didn't stop believing, I just stopped hopping." The lioness watched her, still, calm. "I read Micah's letter. I don't know why you let it happen, and I'm not okay with it, but if you're still here, I want to feel you again." A crack opened in her chest. Tears fell, hot, cleansing. One word slipped free, the first true act of surrender in a long time. "Help me." She sat like that for a long, timeless stretch. Then movement at the tree line, light, quick, drew her attention to her surrounding. She stood squinting. "Micah," she called out before the shape resolved. A young park ranger stumbled into view, breathless and disheveled. "We've been looking for you for weeks," he panted. "There was a radio mix-up, a collapse in the lower ridge, we thought. Lee only managed. I'm fine." He wasn't finished. He thrust a GPS device at her. "You're not going to believe this, but someone's been tracking weather shifts. A rare rain system formed out of nowhere, hit the area earlier than expected. That storm last week, it saved the Southern Valley." She blinked. That valley had been in drought for 5 years. Without that rain, the whole reserve would have burned the next month. The ranger laughed, half in relief, half in wonder. "Someone up there must like you." Lee did not laugh. She looked at the same silent sky she had cursed and felt the world tilt. Sometimes God didn't shout from the heavens. Sometimes he answered in storms and stray lionesses and hidden letters. Sometimes he waited until the lowest point to whisper a rescue. Days later, Lee prepared to go back to her life that she had ran from 6 months. The village came into view just after sunrise. The truck rattled over the rocky path, dust swirling behind it like a memory. Lee sat in the back, her fingers curled loosely around the handle of her pack. The cub and the lioness had been safely relocated to a protected enclosure. The lioness had made a full recovery, everything had changed, and yet, in the deepest sense, nothing had. Micah was still gone and the questions remained, but the terrible, consuming urgency to have them answered had thinned. She could live with the questions now and still believe. Home smelled of dust and eucalyptus. The apartment was exactly as she had left it. She didn't unpack right away. She went to the corkboard on the wall, a faded collage of prayer requests, verses, and one photo of her and Micah at a waterfall, drenched and laughing, stared back at her. A slip of paper fluttered near the corner, written in her own handwriting. God, don't let me forget what your voice sounds like. She had written it the day she left for the reserve and had laughed at herself then. I forgot anyway, but maybe she was beginning to remember. On Sunday, she slipped into the back of the church with her hoodie pulled low, heart knotted. The sanctuary smelled like old hymnals and coffee, the same songs pulling at the rafters. Nothing has changed, but something inside her had. The worship leader didn't see her come in, but Pastor Reuben did, his eyes filled with tears. She gave him a small nod, not a grand return, not an altar call moment, just a quiet yes to being there again. Midway through worship, the band began a song she hadn't heard in years. Even when I don't see it, you're working. And though her hands trembled, she did not leave. She closed her eyes and lifted them, not because she had strength, but because he had been faithful, even at her lowest point, especially there. Months later, what started as a soft, private step became a small, steady habit. Lee began to write. Not a ministry, not a platform, just a quiet, anonymous blog she updated with trembling fingers. Stories of faith lost and found. Letters to the hurting. Notes from the edge of doubt. She called it When the Heaven is Silent, and wrote the first post like a rider holding a torch into a windless night. This is for anyone who's ever stood at the edge of belief and screamed into the silence, wondering if God still hears. I've been there. He does. The work she did after that was not dramatic. It was ordinary, showing up, feeding the animals, answering a message from a stranger who felt like the only person awake in a long night, writing one sentence at a time. It was the slow rebuilding of a life that still held grief, but no longer let that grief be the final word. If there was a single truth she was learning to live by, it was simple and stubborn. Silence did not mean absence. Sometimes silence is the space God uses to catch someone's breath, to let them name their fear, to teach them how to call for help again. Sometimes it is where he waits, patient, present, until you stop running. When was the last time you sensed God might be speaking, but you brushed it off? What wall have you built between yourself and God? Could he be waiting quietly on the other side? What small step could you take today to say yes to God, even if it's imperfectly? If you are watching this and in your own season of silence, grief, or waiting, I want to pause and pray with you. Father, for the one listening who feels abandoned, unheard, or exhausted from waiting, wrap them in your presence right now. Remind them that silence is not your absence. Remind them that their tears are seen, their prayers are heard, and their story is not over. Give them strength for today, hope for tomorrow, and the courage to keep their heart open to you. Heal the places of loss, renew what feels broken, and whisper again your love in a way they cannot miss. In Jesus' name, Amen. Isaiah 30:18 Niv. Yet the Lord longs to be gracious to you, therefore he will rise up to show you compassion. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all who wait for him. Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. If this story touched you, you're not alone. Share this with someone who may be waiting for God in their own silence, and subscribe for more stories of faith and hope. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Quiet Bloom is rooting for you.